Gordon Connors sat in the stands of a large sports hall, admiring his 17-year-old daughter Judith as she displayed her flexibility and artistry on the mat. With light movements, she made the long silk ribbon obediently coil around her slender legs, and then performed a sharp somersault, throwing the ribbon handle into the air and deftly catching it as she gracefully turned around its axis. The audience erupted in applause, and a happy smile lit up Judith's face as she waved goodbye to the audience and left the mat. Her performance was over. "Dad, how was it?" Judith asked excitedly as she tightened the laces on her sneakers. "Fantastic, my dear. You're a professional, a real fairy on stage." Gordon replied with a smile. "If I hadn't seen you working in the gym for 6 hours straight, I never would have thought that all these ribbon movements required such hellish work." "Come on," Judith shrugged. "My standard workouts are nothing special compared to Olympians and champions who work with such dedication. It's something I never even dreamed of. Can you imagine? They sometimes only sleep 4 hours a day and then go straight to training. No, Dad, compared to them, I'm just a simple amateur." Judith shook her head, and instead of saying anything, her father gently stroked her hand. He knew perfectly well how important artistic gymnastics was to her, and how much effort and time his daughter devoted to this beautiful but incredibly difficult activity. "You always downplay your efforts and your talent," Gordon said softly. "That reminds me a lot of your mum. She always doubted herself every time the question arose of putting her paintings up for sale in a gallery. She was always afraid of large exhibitions." Judith looked at him with a hint of sadness. "If you only knew how much I miss her, Dad," the girl said thoughtfully as she adjusted the antique silver bracelet on her wrist, the only memory of her mother, Marissa, left after her death. The bracelet was a gift from her father to her as a sign of strong love, and Marissa never took it off. But when Judith turned 12, Gordon gave her Marissa's bracelet, and like her mother, the girl constantly wore it on her right hand. "You did great, sweetheart. Your mother would be proud of you, trust me," her father reassured her. "It's just a preliminary viewing. You have plenty of time to perfect the elements you're not completely confident about." Judith looked at her father with sincere gratitude and love. "I'm incredibly lucky to have you as my dad. You're the best dad in the world." The girl hugged her father and lightly kissed him on the cheek. "Are you going back to work now?" "Yes," Gordon sighed. "What can I do if my managers can't close any deal without me?" Father and daughter exchanged understanding glances and then laughed together. They both knew that no managers were involved. Gordon Connor, being a successful businessman, liked to plan everything and make deals on his own terms. That's why he often stayed in his office until late at night or went on business trips for weeks. He didn't trust anyone with his business, not even his most trusted people, and preferred to keep control over everything that happened within his company. "Okay, thank you for coming today," Judith said to her father. "It was essential for me, really." "Daughter, remember one thing. You will always be my priority, no matter what. Always." The businessman repeated once again, after which they both got into his luxurious car and headed to their country house. After dropping Judith off at home and saying goodbye to her, the businessman immediately went to his office. He had one important task scheduled for today, and he was really hoping that luck would finally smile on him this time. His partners from France, with whom the businessman had long dreamed of signing a contract, had finally taken notice of his company. Now Gordon Connor was counting on making a very profitable deal with them. As they rode with the driver, the man involuntarily delved into his own memories. Looking at this well-groomed, polished 45-year-old man, not many people would think that he was born and raised in an ordinary family. However, that's exactly how it was. Gordon's parents worked at the factory. His father was a welder, and his mother was a cook in the factory canteen. Climbing the social ladder within his own environment was not easy for young Gordon. As a boy, he dreamed of big money and serious business, and he did not fit into the ideals of the so-called working youth of those years. Some considered him arrogant and conceited. Others called him a failure and warned that his desire would only backfire and that Gordon should not get involved in anything more complicated than construction tools or a drawing compass. However, the young Gordon did not consider it shameful to be among his peers as a black sheep and gradually moved towards his goal of mastering the business world. At home, Gordon did not receive much support, but his father, unlike his mother, who was terribly worried about the future of her overly ambitious son, at least believed that the boy could still make something of himself. "Don't worry so much about him, Mary," Gordon's father would say. "He's a clever boy and studies all day long. Maybe he really will make a name for himself in a big city. Why should he waste his health working with us on the factory floor for the rest of his life?" Mary shook her head and cried, "Ben, dear, just look at him. He's so delicate and weak that he even got a medical exemption from physical education. They'll eat him alive out there." Still, Gordon himself was absolutely confident that he would succeed in his plans, and so he worked hard to enroll in the business school. The hard work and diligence of the young man were ultimately rewarded. Having enrolled in a state-funded place at school, Gordon immediately moved to the capital, where he was allocated a room in a student dormitory. His mother did not believe until the end that her poor boy was leaving to conquer the big city. However, her husband explained to her that such a smart and talented boy as their son simply had no place in their dying village. "Understand, Mary," Ben tried to reason with her. "He has absolutely no future here, unlike in the capital, where he can apply all his skills in practice." Mary continued to cry, but eventually she came to terms with it. She sincerely hoped that her son would succeed and find happiness in the noisy and vibrant metropolis. For the next 5 years, Gordon delighted his parents and teachers with his academic achievements. He was considered one of the best students in his course, passing every session with excellent grades. Gordon's father was very proud of him, and even his mother began to understand that her husband was right after all. They were already making grand plans for their son's future when tragedy struck their lives. Both spouses died in a terrible fire that occurred on their plot of land due to the negligence of drunken neighbours. They held a party in their house and did not keep an eye on the fireplace. At night, the fire broke out with terrible force and immediately spread to the roof of Ben's garage, which stood very close to the neighbour's house, separated from it only by an old flimsy fence. When Gordon's father woke up and rushed to put out the fire, it was already too late. The garage burned almost to the ground, and the flames began to approach the Connors house itself. Trying to extinguish the fire, the spouses used up all the water supplies they had on their plot of land, and were already about to give up on this thankless task, especially since the firefighters were in no hurry to arrive in their remote village. The husband and wife tried to save everything valuable they had accumulated over many years of hard work, money and documents for the house, and at that moment a heavy beam from the ceiling collapsed on them with a terrifying roar. Gordon's parents died almost instantly. Gordon, who was in his final year at school at the time, was in a state of shock when he heard of his parents' death. He could not eat for several days, and during the funeral and memorial service that followed, he could not utter a single word. Black grief corroded his broken heart, and the young man no longer wanted or expected anything from his life. The deaths of his closest and dearest left an indelible mark on his soul, and he struggled to find a reason to continue living. Upon returning to the city, the young man immediately started selling his parents' land. He never wanted to go back to the village again. Too many difficult events had taken place there, and Gordon wanted to permanently close the door on that part of his past. After settling all the land affairs, the future businessman drove back into his studies, trying not to pay attention to the pity in the eyes of his classmates. His main goal now was to graduate from business school with honours. He wanted to honour the memory of his mother and father and prove to himself that he could still achieve his goal. Otherwise, all of his studies and his move to the capital would have been in vain. The only person who supported him during this time was his girlfriend Marissa. She was studying art history. The young student was fascinated by painting and architecture, and even painted quite well herself, but she never believed in her own abilities, enough to switch from studying art to its direct creation. Marissa admired Gordon's perseverance and determination, so when he was almost broken by the tragedy of losing his family, she did everything possible to make her beloved not feel alone. It was then that Gordon first thought about how strong his feelings for Marissa were. Realizing that only she had been his support and encouragement through this terrible time, Gordon decided to take the plunge and make his beloved a proposal. "Will you marry me?" Gordon asked in front of the Philharmonic after they left the concert. To make his words sound more solemn, the guy knelt down in front of his beloved and handed her a small, heart-shaped box covered in red velvet. Inside there was a wedding ring made of gold with a tiny but sparkling diamond on a snowy silk pillow. "Oh my goodness, Gordon!" Marissa exclaimed admiringly. "It's so beautiful." Gordon looked at her expectantly, and with some tension in his gaze. Marissa forgot herself for a moment, slightly bewildered by the unexpected situation, but then exclaimed joyfully, "Yes, of course I agree." A stone seemed to fall from Gordon's soul. In a burst of emotion, he whirled Marissa in a light dance, then gently kissed his bride. After the wedding, life took on new colours for Gordon. First, he needed to find a job that would allow them to rent a good apartment and continue the cultural lifestyle they had become accustomed to during their student days. So, after collecting his documents and certificates, the guy went to interview at all the decent companies that were willing to consider him for a position as an economist or financial analyst. After the third interview, he was hired by a promising young company that supplied building materials throughout the country. And it was in this company that he worked until the moment he was offered to head it. Marissa, too, was not going to sit on her young husband's shoulders, and so she quickly found a position as a staff guide in one of the capital's museums. Yes, it was not as prestigious as working as a real art historian, but it was certainly better than running around as a waitress in some cheap diner while her diploma gathers dust on a shelf and does not benefit society in any way. The young couple worked hard and then could spend whole days disappearing somewhere in theatres or at fashionable exhibitions. This did not sit well with Marissa's parents, who constantly pressured their daughter to give them grandchildren. However, the girl was determined to first stand on her own 2 feet and then focus on expanding her family. "I don't like these progressive views of yours, my daughter," Marissa's mother would exclaim every time she came to visit her daughter. "Your father and I are not getting any younger, you know. When will you make us happy with your children?" "Mum, Gordon and I are adults and independent people. We can raise our children ourselves. If we need your help, it will definitely be one-time assistance. Don't worry." Marissa's mother pursed her lips reproachfully. She never thought that in her old age she would encounter her own daughter's reluctance to have children. "If you were adults, you would have been taking care of children for a long time, instead of cultivating ourselves to no end," she muttered. Elena, Marissa's mother, although a native urban resident, was a representative of the so-called old school. She didn't understand why her daughter and son-in-law didn't live like all the other normal daughters of her friends. "You seem to have forgotten what a woman's true mission is, haven't you?" Eleanor asked her daughter with reproachful eyes. "Mum, please don't start, I beg you," Marissa pleaded, rolling her eyes. "Well then, let me remind you. It's not difficult for me," Elena continued, seemingly ignoring her objections. "A woman's mission is to give birth and raise children, passing on all her experience and love to the next generation." Marissa covered her ears with her hands every time her mother brought up the same old topic. Her mother had been a middle school teacher at a comprehensive school her whole life and had given birth to Marissa quite late, according to her friends' standards, when she was already over 30. "Mum, I promise that when Gordon and I decide to have a child, you and Dad will be the first to know," Marissa replied warily, unable to go against her mother's stubbornness. And 4 years later, Gordon and Marissa felt fully ready to have a son or daughter, and Marissa got pregnant. By that time, Gordon had become a successful top manager in his company, and the CEO warned him that he saw him as his future successor. According to him, only a person like Gordon Connor could provide his company with decent development after he retired. Gordon took his boss's words seriously and was willing to work 2 or 3 times harder if the company needed it. At the same time, he had no intention of missing his wife's delivery, as he warned his leadership. The director responded surprisingly calmly, to the extent that he trusted his best employee, so he gave Gordon something like a mini maternity leave for the time of the delivery. Nothing foretold trouble, and Marissa was already choosing a name for their baby girl when the thunderbolt struck out of the blue. Her mother died. Marissa's father called Gordon that day and told him that his wife had suffered a heart attack overnight. Gordon was stunned by the news and didn't know how to tell Marissa about it. He was distressed that such a shock could negatively affect the baby's condition. So, at first he even thought of not telling his wife anything until after the delivery so as not to worry her. However, nothing came of this idea. Marissa quickly understood from his face that something had happened at home. "You're hiding something from me. I can see it," Marissa said to Gordon, lying in a maternity ward for expectant mothers and stroking her large, round belly. "You only worsen it by not telling me anything." Her husband looked at his beloved wife. In her eyes, he saw regret and pain. "What happened?" the pregnant woman asked him again more insistently. "Something happened to my parents." "Don't be silent. Tell me already." Gordon took a deep breath before slowly saying, "Yes, dear Marissa, don't worry. Your mother—" What is it?" Marissa said, turning pale, even though she had already guessed that something bad had happened. "She's no longer with us," Gordon said quietly, bowing his head. For the next few moments, Marissa sat silently and completely motionless. Her husband began to worry that she might have gone into shock, when suddenly his wife burst into tears several times, saying, Mummy, my dear, why did you leave me?" Gordon tried to calm her down as best he could, but quickly noticed that his wife's weeping had turned into painful cries. Then he called a nurse, who, after a brief examination of Marissa and feeling her belly, confirmed that she had started labor. "Oh, God, it hurts!" Marissa exclaimed again when they were taking her to the delivery room. Throughout the entire ordeal, Gordon remained by his wife's side, offering words of encouragement, even though he couldn't quite recall them now, so many years later. He was not allowed in the operating room, so he spent the next few hours in the corridor, seated on a hard, uncomfortable chair. At some point, his nerves got the best of him, and he simply blacked out. He only came to when the doctor, delivering the baby, shook him forcefully by the shoulder. "Mr. Connor, are you okay? Wake up, please." Gordon struggled to come to and started rubbing his face with his palms to regain his composure. When he looked up at the doctor, he knew immediately that something was wrong. Her face was as white as a sheet, and the hand that had just woken him was cold as ice and lifeless. "How is my wife? How is Marissa? Is she okay?" the businessman asked first. The doctor and nurse exchanged a brief look, and then the doctor informed Gordon, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Connor. We did everything we could for your wife, but the bleeding was too severe, and the baby was huge. Coming out, she hit a vital artery in Marissa's body. She simply didn't have a chance. Please, accept my condolences." Gordon then felt his chin tremble with horror, and tears streamed down his face against his will. "No," he whispered, shaking his head in denial. "No, it can't be. She couldn't have died. Marissa couldn't have." "Claire, take Mr. Connor to an empty ward and give him a sedative," the doctor commanded the nurse. "We can't have him having a breakdown here." The man didn't even remember how he ended up in the ward, lying on a hard bed and staring at the ceiling, fixated on a single point next to the old chandelier. It was only now sinking in that he had lost her. He had lost his Marissa, the only woman with whom he felt truly alive and happy. "Oh, why?" Connor roared like a wounded animal. "Why her?" All that remained in his chest, all the remnants of his soul, seemed to have been burned to ashes. The pain of loss was so strong that he felt it physically, right where his tortured heart was. Only later did he remember that he had a child, a daughter. "A girl, my daughter, how is she?" Gordon asked, surrounded by silence. Jumping out of bed, the man rushed into the doctor's office. "Calm down, sit down, please," the doctor said, pointing to a chair. When Gordon reluctantly obeyed, the woman continued, "Your daughter is fine. She's in the postnatal capsule right now. It's perfectly normal for her condition. Listen, I understand what you're going through now. Honestly, you're not the first and unfortunately not the last man whose wife dies giving childbirth. It happens, and there's nothing to be done about it. The only thing you need to think about now, and what you need to focus on most, is your little girl in the newborn box. She's a fighter and a survivor, so be a living example for her. Be strong and confident in your own success. Believe me, children pick up on this no worse than adults. Besides, it will help you bond, which is incredibly important for a child who lost her mother in the first few hours of life." Gordon slowly nodded, swallowing a huge sour lump that stood in his throat with difficulty. He would become the best father in the world for his daughter. When he was allowed to take his daughter, the man almost cried when he saw the tiny baby girl in a warm pink envelope. On the same day, he named the girl Judith. For the next 17 years, the businessman did everything possible to make his daughter feel loved and supported every minute. Although being a single father was difficult at first, Gordon managed to get through this challenging period. Despite his constant workload, he tried to be near his child at the first opportunity. When Judith became seriously interested in artistic gymnastics at the age of 4, her father was amazed by the willpower and perseverance of his beloved daughter. Marissa's father helped his son-in-law during the early years by taking the little girl to training and later to competitions. Judith adored her grandfather and considered him her second best friend on earth after her dad. Unfortunately, he was already quite elderly at the time and, like his deceased wife, had heart problems. When his grandfather turned 9, her grandfather passed away. The cause of his death was a massive stroke, which immediately caused complications for his heart. Judith cried a lot and for a long time. She could not imagine life without her beloved grandfather. So Gordon was forced to take an unscheduled leave of absence from his company indefinitely. For the next 2 weeks, he did not leave his daughter's side, constantly comforting and distracting her until the little child gradually subsided. Over time, Judith returned to her usual daily routine and constant training, and this became the salvation that helped her finally calm down and become stronger in spirit. "I will dedicate every victory of mine to my grandfather," Judith promised her father once. "I believe that he, Mum and Grandma are watching over me from heaven, and they would like me to succeed in sports." "Of course, my dear," the businessman affectionately smiled, stroking his daughter's soft, light chestnut hair. "To me, you are an incredibly wise girl. I'm overjoyed that you were able to let go of your grandfather and continue to enjoy life." "Mr. Connor, are you okay? Do you hear me?" his driver called out, bringing the man out of his contemplation as they were already approaching the office. "Oh, did you say something?" Gordon couldn't return to reality immediately. The driver looked at him attentively in the rearview mirror, but didn't say anything. He often noticed how his boss would get lost in his thoughts during the trip, and had already gotten used to it. "Yes, I was saying that the HR department just called, and they were able to find a new receptionist for you," the driver responded, carefully parking the boss's car. "They're asking for you to take a look at her. They say she's very competent, has worked for your competitors, but left because they didn't pay her enough." "I see," Gordon sneered. "Well, okay, let's see who this lady is. I hope she can at least make a good cup of coffee." A quarter of an hour later, he was already interviewing a tall and leggy beauty in her 30s. Extending her elegant, slender hand in greeting, the woman introduced herself as Linda and told the businessman about her extensive experience in the secretarial field. The company director was pleased to note to himself that the HR people had not lied to him. This sultry brunette with plump lips and a thin waist held herself with dignity and could present herself as if she were a real professional. Her gorgeous appearance was just the icing on the cake and fully met the requirements of such a solid company as they were. "I think we'll work well together, Linda. Congratulations. You're hired to work with us. Of course, you'll have to go through a probationary period first, but I don't think you'll have any problems with that," Gordon said. Linda smiled at him with a charming, white-toothed smile, then elegantly tossed a strand of her dark, coffee-coloured hair over her shoulder. "Thank you, Mr. Connor," she murmured. "I'm also confident that I'll enjoy working at your company. I can feel positive energy everywhere here." The woman easily stood up from her chair, and at that moment, a small but very piquant part of her tanned cleavage was revealed to the businessman's gaze. Linda smiled again, while Gordon was involuntarily thrown into a fever, and for a few moments it even became more difficult for him to breathe. Since the death of his beloved Marissa, the businessman had never remarried. Moreover, he had never been able to find a worthy companion with whom he could enjoy a leisurely time, and to whom he could open his soul as easily as he had once done with his wife. He was also worried about Judith and how she would react to the appearance of another woman in his life. Would she get along with the hypothetical stepmother, or would their relationship be constantly strained? All these fears tormented Gordon all the time and did not allow him to truly relax in the company of a pleasant woman. Later he gave up on these thoughts, citing his age and constant business engagements. He thought, who would marry someone as busy as me? And now there was stunning Linda in front of him, whose smile could drive any sane man crazy with just a snap of her fingers. However, Gordon dismissed such thoughts from his mind. He did not want to become a bad example of the well-known story about a boss and his secretary. Gathering all his self-control, Gordon politely said goodbye to the young woman, who sent him a promising smile in response, before gracefully slipping out the slightly opened door of his office. The businessman breathed a sigh of relief as he leaned back in his chair. He had not expected such a turn of events, even from himself. Could it be that he felt true, intense emotions in his heart for the first time in all these years? Was this the autumn of love that so many well-known poets had written about in their verses? It's not fitting for someone my age to just dive headfirst into this, Gordon thought to himself. I need to wait a little and take a closer look at Linda. After making up his mind, the man had a hard time getting back to work and spent the rest of the day filling out another final report. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get the secretary, the beauty with whom he was now supposed to work side by side, out of his head. What an old fool I am, Gordon scolded himself. God forbid you fall in love in your old age. What are you going to do with all these feelings? The man shook his head, scolding himself for his emotional outburst, and only managed to calm down after washing his face with cold water for several long minutes. Meanwhile, Linda, with a satisfied smile on her face, stepped out of the building and got into a taxi. After giving the driver the address, she leaned against the car window and thought to herself, "Gotcha, my dear. Now, I'm going to get everything out of you. It would be a shame to let such a big fish slip away. It's time for me to get my share of happiness with the millionaire. I just need to finish one business first, and then I'll get down to you, Mr. Connor." "Turn up the volume," she said to the driver, and he turned up the radio. The salon was filled with some pop melody in which the singer boasted to her listeners about her wealth and happiness, which consisted of private planes, diamonds, and rich idiots. In reality, Linda didn't like music very much, but this song reflected perfectly her current enthusiastic mood. A couple of weeks later, Gordon's life was sharply divided into before and after. As usual, the businessman drove his daughter to her training and then went to the office. Judith, a recent graduate, decided to dedicate her life fully to artistic gymnastics. That's why she wanted to compete in the regional championships first and then start preparing for admission to a coaching school. Nothing foretold the terrible disaster that was about to invade Gordon's life like a terrible storm. He was working in his office when his mobile phone unexpectedly rang. Holding the screen to his face, the man was surprised to see that it was his daughter calling. Strange, the businessman thought to himself. Judith never calls during training. Has something happened? Feeling a light sense of worry in his heart, Gordon answered the call. "Hello, daughter," he cautiously said. Hello, Gordon Connor?" asked an unfamiliar female voice. "Yes," he replied with a trembling voice. "Why are you calling from my daughter's phone? Who are you?" There was a 1-second pause on the other end of the line, and then the female voice said, "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your daughter fainted right during practice. I don't know what happened to her, but now she's being taken away by ambulance. You'd better come to the hospital. I'll give you the address." Gordon felt like the ground was slipping from under him, and his vision began to darken. He wrote down the hospital address, drank a large glass of water with a calming tablet, and then went there. Upon explaining who he was and why he had come, he was immediately taken to the doctor in charge of Judith's condition since her admission. The businessman noted with annoyance that the doctor's expression was distressed. "Explain to me what's wrong with my Judith," he asked when they entered the doctor's office. The doctor hesitated for a moment before asking with a sigh, "Have you ever noticed any suspicious symptoms in your daughter? Sudden bruises, weakness, or elevated body temperature without a reason?" The businessman shook his head in confusion and said, "No, never. My daughter is an athlete. Of course, she often gets bruises, but she never complained about anything you're talking about." The doctor thoughtfully twirled his pen in his hands before answering. I see. Well, I have bad news for you. Gordon tensed up, unable to even guess what the doctor was going to say. There's a suspicion that Judith has acute leukemia. Unfortunately, this disease can manifest in a person at almost any age, and teenagers who engage in physical activity are also at risk. Gordon lowered his eyes, unable to look at the doctor. He hadn't fully realized yet that his daughter was in mortal danger. Looking at his hands, the businessman was surprised to note that they were shaking with a slight tremor. It seemed to him that he was in some terrible dream, a nightmare from which there was only one way out: to wake up. Can I help her somehow? He asked the doctor in a low voice. His own voice seemed foreign to him, as if he saw and heard himself from the side, like in a movie. Yes, but we don't have much time. We'll do additional tests. So for now, your daughter will stay under our supervision. You can donate your blood for analysis. If you have a full match, then we can perform a bone marrow transplant operation from you to your daughter. This is the only way to completely overcome the disease. At the doctor's words, a tiny spark of hope lit up in the businessman's eyes. Of course, I'm ready to do anything, even give up my life, just as long as my girl recovers. Okay, the doctor nodded. Then let's go. We need to prepare you. Here, Gordon stopped the doctor, lightly touching his hand. Excuse me, can I see Judith before? I need to talk to my daughter, explain everything to her. She must be terrified right now. The doctor's voice sounded gentle as he replied, Don't worry, she already knows everything. Your girl is a real fighter, so calmly accepted the news. The doctor looked at the businessman with a slight envy. You know, if I had a daughter like that, I would be incredibly proud of her. Such resilience, such a desire to live. Gordon absent-mindedly nodded. Yes, I have such a daughter. You're not the first to tell me something like that. Several hours later, when all the necessary tests were conducted, the doctor came out of the office, looking at their results gloomily. From his face, the businessman understood that the doctor was very dissatisfied with something. To my great regret, Mr. Connor, you are not a good match. At that moment, the world lost all its colour in the businessman's eyes. Gordon felt his hands suddenly grow cold, slowly sitting on the edge of the chair, standing in the hall. But why? He could only ask. This often happens, the doctor answered as calmly as possible. Don't be upset prematurely. We simply need a closer relative with similar genetic material. Tell me, does your daughter have any siblings? Perhaps her mother will also try. The depressed millionaire struggled to answer. Her mother died many years ago during childbirth. I'm the only one she has left. Judith has no brothers or sisters. The doctor sat down next to the businessman and pursed his lips. Then, you have only one option left, to urgently find a donor. I will, of course, send a request through my channels, but the chance that we can find one so quickly is extremely low. Try to find any other relatives of Judith, preferably on her mother's side. Even distant relatives could accidentally have the suitable phenotype we need. Gordon listened to the doctor while a fog filled his mind. Finally, turning to the doctor, he looked at him with eyes full of silent pleading. Can I see Judith, please? Of course, come with me. The doctor instantly responded and led the man to her ward. Dad! Exclaimed Judith, and her father rushed to her, tightly embracing his daughter. Judith, my dear, how are you? Asked the man, tears already shimmering in his eyes. Judith looked very pale, but still held up well. When she spoke, her voice sounded almost perky. Fine, considering what happened to me, Dad. How is this possible? Why did this disease choose me? There was no fear in Judith's eyes, but there was a huge question and a sense of injustice. And what about my competitions and training? The girl tried to discuss the most everyday things, apparently trying to push away the most terrible thoughts. Gordon smiled at his daughter through tears and gently stroked her face as if she were made of crystal. "I'm afraid we'll have to say goodbye to that for a while. Right now, your health is the most important thing." After a moment of silence, the businessman decided to be honest with his daughter. "Judith, unfortunately, I won't be able to be your donor. My blood doesn't match yours, but I will definitely solve this problem. I'll find a donor, I promise." Learning that the last hope had been dispelled, Judith couldn't hold back her own tears. "How long, Dad?" "What do you mean, my dear?" He didn't understand. "How long do the doctors give me?" The man sighed heavily, and so the girl understood from the sigh that she didn't have much time left. "I see," Judith said slowly. "So it turns out that this could be our last meeting." The girl looked at her father so piercingly that the businessman's heart ached. "No, of course not." He tried to calm her down. "And I will definitely come to see you. I will find someone whose blood will definitely suit you. I'll save you, my daughter, I swear." Judith slowly stroked her father's cheek and said, "Promise me you won't give up. Even if I am not in your life, you must definitely live and remember me. Then I will be calm up there." The girl looked up at the ceiling, meaning the sky, where her mother and grandparents were. "Don't say such things to me," Gordon exclaimed in despair. "You will live, do you hear me? You will survive." Gordon left the hospital in such a state that it seemed he had been hit by a train. Just 1 month left for his daughter, because the disease struck her with terrible force. The doctor said that the outbreak of leukemia could have been triggered by the strongest stress on the eve of the competition. For the first time in his life, Gordon regretted giving his daughter artistic gymnastics. Exhausted, the man sat down on the cold stone steps leading to the medical facility and, in despair, clasped his head with his hands. What was he going to do now? Where to find this damned donor with Marissa's entire family had long been dead, and he had never heard of any other relatives of hers. At that moment, he saw out of the corner of his eye a woman stopping in front of him. More precisely, he didn't see all of her, only her legs in summer open-toed shoes. A long blue skirt made of light material flowed around her legs. Gordon slowly raised his face, exhausted by his emotions, to her. "Who are you?" he asked, looking at the smiling fortune-teller, who was leisurely strolling through the city streets at this hour. "I'm Agnesa," the fortune-teller replied solemnly and extended her hand to him. "I see that you need help. Let me read your hand for you. Don't worry, I won't take any money from you. I know when people are sincerely worried about their troubles, and when they come for a fortune-telling just for fun." The most interesting thing was that Agnesa did not look like a gypsy from the travelling camp at all. She was a decently dressed young woman, about 30 years old, with long, blonde hair tied up in a high ponytail, and a light blue denim jacket casually draped over her aristocratic shoulders. Her blue eyes looked at Gordon with such sincere sympathy and warmth that he couldn't dismiss her. "I don't think you can help me," the man said wearily. "No one can find an answer to the question that is now troubling me the most in the world." The fortune-teller's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Don't you believe in the power of my gift? Or do you think that because I don't look like a gypsy, I'm of no use? Well, my grandmother was an Irish gypsy." Gordon looked at the woman with curiosity. "I've never heard of such a thing before," he said to her, slowly rising to his feet. "Well, Agnesa, if you're so certain, then please." The man extended his hand to the fortune-teller, who instantly grabbed it, carefully examining the tiniest lines on his palm and fingers. All this time, Agnesa twisted his wrist this way and that, and at the same time constantly nodding affirmatively, as if she had already figured everything out and was looking for only the final confirmation of her amazing discovery. "It's all clear," she finally said, and she looked at the rich man with sincere sympathy. "Someone in your bloodline. Your daughter or sister is sick. I think it's your daughter. You want to help her, but you don't know how. Fate says you need to find a second one. Then you'll be able to save her." Gordon, who had been standing all this time, listening to the fortune-teller with undisguised amazement, suddenly frowned. "Second one? What does all this mean?" Agnesa looked at his palm again and nodded affirmatively. "It's all true. There can be no doubt." Gordon snatched his hand from her and muttered disappointedly, "What kind of nonsense is this? And I almost fell for it. What a fool I am." Agnesa, realizing that the man didn't believe her, just shrugged her shoulders. "It's up to you. I told you the whole truth as it is. It's salvation for your daughter. If you let everything run its course, don't badmouth me later, because I warned you." Agnesa strode away towards the park, leaving the bewildered and shocked rich man alone with his thoughts. To find second one, what would that mean? The businessman pondered. Although he didn't believe in the prediction of this strange blonde, his gut feeling told him that there was something useful in this phrase. Something that could help him find a way out of the terrible situation with Judith. Agnesa was on her way home when she witnessed a horrifying scene. While walking across the old bridge, the fortune-teller saw a girl of about 17 to 18 years old climbing over the railing. The intention was more than easily guessed, and so Agnesa rushed towards her and only by a miracle managed to grab the unfortunate girl by the shoulder, pulling her violently towards her. "Are you crazy?" she shouted at the sobbing girl. "Are you fed up with life or what?" "What if I am?" shouted the unhappy girl, as large tears welled up in her eyes. "What am I supposed to do? Beg for help when I have nowhere else to go?" After taking a deep breath, the fortune-teller knelt down next to the girl. "I understand that something has happened, something terrible, apparently, since you decided to take such a terrible step. But the worst and most unfair things in the world shouldn't push you to do something so drastic. Life is the most important and precious thing we have." The young stranger looked at the fortune-teller, her face reflecting hopelessness and suffering. "I was deceived," she tried to explain. "Deceived so much that now I don't even know how to live on and what to do." Agnesa looked at her with doubt. "A boyfriend, maybe?" "No." The stranger waved her hand, tried to stand up, but still felt a bit shaky from the shock she had just experienced. "My own aunt deceived me. She stole my apartment by deception and changed the locks. I didn't even have time to take my things before she threw me out of there like a kitten." The girl covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Agnesa felt sorry for the young fool who was ready to give up on life because of some unhappy square meters. Then she suggested to the girl, "You know what? Let's go to my place right now. I'll give you some hot tea, and we can eat something too. And you can tell me everything in detail. Who deceived you and how? Maybe I can help you with something." The girl looked at Agnesa with red, tearful eyes and nodded gratefully. "Thank you, and please forgive me. I didn't mean to scare anyone. It's just desperation." "Don't worry, I'm not vindictive," the fortune-teller said, smiling and extending her hand for a handshake. "My name is Agnes. And yours?" "Elaine." The girl nodded and replied, shaking hands. "What a beautiful name you have. Is it something European?" "Greek," the fortune-teller explained. "It's just not very common nowadays. My grandmother chose this name for me. Everyone hoped that I would make fewer mistakes in my life than my mother did." The woman explained to Elaine that the name Agnesa translates from ancient Greek as pure, immaculate. Grandma said that one of her admirers sent her to the other world out of jealousy, Agnesa said in passing while they were putting the kettle on and arranging cookies on a plate. By that time, they had already arrived at the fortune-teller's small apartment. "How terrible!" Elaine exclaimed. How did you survive that?" The woman shrugged and threw her jacket on the old sofa. "I don't know. I was only 5 then. My grandmother raised me. She took care of me all the time before that, while my mother arranged her personal life. And when all this happened, she took me out of the camp and moved here to the city. Since then, we'd been living together. She taught me her skill, and I was her best helper around the house. It's a pity that she didn't live to see my graduation from school. My grandmother made me such a dress that all my classmates were green with envy all evening. Losing a mother is the biggest tragedy in a person's life," Elaine said thoughtfully before adding, "I lost mine too just 4 months ago." "My condolences." The fortune teller lowered her eyes. "And what happened? Sorry if I'm prying into your business, but you promised to tell me what happened to you, remember?" Elaine looked sadly at her new acquaintance. "It was an accident. My mum was coming home from work and crossing the road on a green light. At that moment, some car just couldn't manage to control it. The police said the brakes failed, or something like that." Agnesa looked at her sympathetically. "And then her sister appeared," Elaine continued. "I had just finished school and wanted to go to college to study history. All this fell on me so unexpectedly and terribly. My mother's death, the uncertainty of what to do next." Elaine took a deep breath before continuing. "She came to the funeral for the first time. She was all so beautiful, caring, and helped me with the memorial service. But then, when all the guests left, it was as if she had been replaced. She became a cold, calculating woman." "Well, it seems like you have some strained relationships with your aunt," Agnesa clarified, amazed. "That's putting it mildly." Elaine wiped away tears of anger with her fist. "She just needed my mother's apartment, that's all. She complained to me that I was alone in such a huge apartment while she had to rent. Then she tricked me and took away my apartment." The fortune teller listened attentively as the girl vented her frustrations. "In the end," Elaine continued, "the aunt suggested that we exchange this big apartment for 2 small ones so that none of us would be offended. At first I was upset, but then I felt sorry for her. She and her mother had a terrible relationship their whole lives. I don't know what caused it, but it was probably something serious. They wouldn't have fought over something trivial." Elaine took a big sip of tea and finished her sad story. "Anyway, I agreed to the exchange, but she brought her lawyer. I couldn't even read the documents properly before signing. Of course I'm to blame for that. I should have insisted on reviewing them first, but it turned out that there was no exchange at all, and I unknowingly signed over my mother's apartment to her." At this point, Elaine couldn't hold back the tears any longer and cried uncontrollably. "I'm such a fool," she scolded herself. "How could I trust her?" "You couldn't have known that she would do something so despicably to you." The fortune teller tried to comfort her. "We never expect bad things from our close people." But Elaine shook her head negatively. "I should have sensed it. I should have guessed that if she was acting so strangely and insistently, she had definitely planned something bad. But I fell for it like a complete idiot." The girl told Agnesa that when she returned from her preparatory courses for college the next day, she couldn't get into her own home. She pounded on the door for a long time until the aunt finally opened it and declared that the apartment was now hers. "Can you imagine how I felt?" she asked the fortune teller. "She told me that she had changed the locks and that there was nothing in the apartment that was mine anymore. And when I asked her where I should go now, do you know what she said to me?" Agnesa looked curiously at the girl. "She said that I should try to get into college on the first try and immediately get a room in the dormitory and have a place to live." The young fortune teller was amazed at the cynicism of this horrible woman and patted Elaine on the shoulder. "Only don't worry so much. We'll figure something out. You can stay with me for as long as you want. You're a good girl, and I can see that you're not lying about the aunt and your situation. Any of us could find ourselves in this situation. If you only knew what I sometimes see when I read people's hands." and Agnesa shook her head meaningfully. At that moment, a tiny glimmer of hope appeared in Elaine's eyes. "Thank you so much." She gratefully thanked the fortune teller. "And I will definitely find a job, you'll see. I'll help you clean and cook, if you like." In response, Agnesa advised the girl not to worry and promised her that she would definitely come up with a way to teach her aunt a lesson and return Elaine's rightful apartment. For the next couple of weeks, Elaine lived in Agnesa's tiny apartment and helped her with housework, and the fortune teller earned a living entertaining passers-by in the park, at the weekend fair, and by doing personalized tarot readings and astrological forecasts, for which, as Agnesa assured Elena, she was always paid the most money. Elaine also didn't waste any time and went to various interviews. After the shocking experience with her aunt in the apartment, she couldn't thoroughly prepare for enrolling at college. Therefore, the girl decided to find any job possible to not be a burden on Agnesa. At the same time, Gordon struggled to hold on with his last strength. He was constantly searching for a suitable donor for his daughter, but so far it was all in vain. As before, the businessman visited Judith in the hospital, but every time he became more and more convinced that she had very little time left. Everyone, including Judith, understood this and didn't lose hope of finally finding the donor for her. Remembering the strange prediction of the fortune teller, Gordon decided to hire the best detectives in the city to try to find any distant relatives who could be potential donors. "You need to calm down and relax, Mr. Connor," Linda said soothingly, offering him a cup of coffee with dark bitter chocolate on a saucer, his favourite treat that helped him relieve stress. "I'm sure eventually you will achieve your goal. Judith will definitely recover," she added. Each time the secretary looked at her boss with such a languid look that he had to look away. He still liked this gorgeous woman very much, but his daughter was his main priority. Seeing that she was unable to captivate this wealthy boss, Linda was breaking her nails with anger while still showing the friendliest smile she could. "Damn Judith," thought the woman. "Why did you have to get sick now, just when we started to make progress? Couldn't you have waited a year for me and your father to get married? And then you could have died. I'd inherit his entire fortune, and I would find a way to dispose of the money properly." Nurturing such sinister plans, Linda continued to work for Gordon's company while trying to conquer this impregnable fortress like her boss. One day, when Gordon was carefully studying the conditions of an upcoming deal, his phone suddenly rang with a melodious trill. When he picked up the receiver, it turned out to be one of the detectives had sent to search for Marissa's relatives. "Well, any news?" the businessman asked hopefully. "Yes and no," the detective replied evasively. "You see, something interesting was found out, but your wife has no more relatives." Gordon's heart immediately sank. "And you certain? Maybe you didn't search well enough." A deep sigh was heard at the other end of the phone. "Believe me, Mr. Connor, we've combed through all the archives and found absolutely nothing. However, as I said before, we did find something interesting." The businessman immediately focused his maximum attention on the detective's voice. "And what is it? Don't keep me waiting." "When we checked the hospital archives where your wife gave birth, we found an interesting detail. In one of the 2 reports I found, it said that your wife gave birth to 2 girls, identical twins." Gordon nervously rubbed his forehead in his office. He definitely didn't understand what was going on, but the doctor never told us anything like that. I don't understand how this is possible. "Did you have an ultrasound?" the detective asked. "Yes, but you can imagine what it was like back then. There was only one device for the whole city, and even then it was malfunctioning. If some mistake happened and the doctor performing the ultrasound simply didn't see the second child. But that still doesn't change the fact that I never knew about a second daughter. Where is she in that case?" The detective paused for a moment, apparently considering how best to deliver the next piece of news. And that's where it gets interesting. At the same time as your wife, another woman was giving birth, the daughter of the same midwife who delivered your wife's children. And according to the documents, the midwife's granddaughter died during childbirth, suffocating in the umbilical cord. Oh my goodness, Gordon couldn't hold back any longer. But what does that have to do with me? I'm afraid it's quite direct, Mr. Connor, the detective continued. We found the 2 original true reports and compared them with the official ones. After that, it became clear to us that your wife had given birth to twins, but since she died, they did not tell you, giving you only one daughter. And the midwife's daughter was given your second daughter. They gave away my little girl, didn't they? He finally realized. I'm afraid yes, the detective replied sadly. My men found both reports in the secret compartment of the doctor's drawer. Don't ask me how we did it, we won't say anyway, the detective added with professional humour. The fact is that the midwife's daughter never found out. She thought she had given birth to her own child. Shortly after that, they all, the midwife and her daughter, moved somewhere up north, and their tracks were completely lost. So you don't know where my daughter is now? Gordon asked quietly. Unfortunately, that's all we were able to find out, the detective replied. But now you know that there is a second daughter somewhere, and if you're lucky enough to find her... How? How am I supposed to find her when I was counting on you for this? Gordon couldn't hold back and exploded at the detective. I don't have any more time. Judith doesn't have any more time. Your stupid head. It took a second for the businessman to regain his composure and apologize to the detective. Thanking him for his work, Gordon hung up and slowly sank into his work chair. So they deceived me in the most brazen way, giving away only one of the twins. My wife's medical record was completely fabricated. Marissa died and the midwife thought that there would be nothing wrong with giving one of my twins to her daughter so that she wouldn't go mad with grief. Gordon felt empty and broken. His last hope had died before he could even get it together. Now, the businessman knew only one thing. If he lost Judith, he would lose all motivation for further life and work. His daughter was everything to him, and he definitely didn't want to live in a world where she no longer existed. 3 days later, Agnesa brought Elaine a newspaper with free ads. Here, I picked it up on the way. Maybe you'll find something normal here, the fortune teller suggested, seeing how desperately the girl was suffering without a job. Wherever she went during this time, she was always offered to take some paid courses first, or even turned away, citing the lack of any experience from yesterday's schoolgirl. Elaine was finally devastated and was about to try to take out a loan from the bank to take at least some training that would qualify her for a job. But Agnesa was able to convince her not to do this. Better look through the newspaper, she urged, becoming Elaine's best friend during this time. Vacations for ordinary people were always printed here. Maybe you'll find something you like. The girl followed the fortune teller's advice and carefully studied the thin magazine. After agonizing over a choice between a dishwasher and a cleaner vacancy, Elaine still chose the latter. And rightly so, Agnesa said. Of course it's not the most prestigious profession, but the company is excellent and well known, and the salary here is promised to be decent. That's a reason to try for an interview. Elaine agreed with a sigh. This was not the career she dreamed of, but on the other hand, she had to start somewhere. Arriving at the specified address, the girl found a large and bright office of the company, inside which cleanliness and beauty prevailed. However, when she climbed to the 5th floor to see the HR manager, Elaine froze, as if rooted to the spot, unable to say a word. The girl turned pale as a sheet. Her only desire at that moment was to sink into the ground. But it was already too late. Linda noticed her and now stood, blocking Elaine's way to the office and putting her hands on her hips. "You!" she hissed. "What are you doing here, little brat?" Elaine looked at Linda head-on, not taking her angry but proud gaze off her. "I came to apply for a job. Let me through," she said, trying to pass Linda. However, the woman roughly grabbed the girl by the shoulders. "Are you applying for the janitor position? Oh my God, I've been sitting here wondering how the wind blew you in here." The secretary's gaze at that moment resembled the gaze of a snake preparing for a deadly jump. "No, my dear, not today." Linda pushed Elaine to the other end of the corridor. "You have no business here. I don't want it to accidentally come out that you're related to me. That would be a disgrace." Linda looked at the young girl with all the anger and hatred boiling in her heart. But at this time, hearing strange screams and commotion behind the door, Gordon decided to go out and see what had happened. "Linda, what's going on?" Linda tried to explain something to him, but she saw the chief's face turn grey at the sight of his niece. "Mr. Connor, what's wrong with you?" The secretary asked cautiously, and the smile instantly disappeared from her face. "Judith?" the businessman stammered. Elaine looked at him with incomprehension, her gaze shifting from her aunt to the man and back. Linda turned to her niece, and Elaine was ready to swear that she saw hellfire in her eyes. "Get out of here immediately," Linda ordered her. However, Connor reached out to the girl and shook his head. "No, Linda, let her stay. Please, miss. I don't know your name, but give me a couple of minutes, I beg you." Elaine didn't know what to do, but the desperation on this man's face was evident, so she agreed. "Okay," she simply said, and followed Gordon. He was in a state of complete shock. Before him stood an exact copy of his daughter. Could it be true? Was this girl really his lost daughter? If so, he had one last chance to save his child. "Please, let's do a DNA test," he begged Elaine in his office. "My daughter is about to die. The doctors have done everything they can. If it turns out that you and my daughter are sisters, it could literally save her life." Elaine doubted that this could actually happen, but the story that the businessman told her about himself, his daughter, and the investigation results convinced her to try. After all, if this is really true, and Judith is her sister, then she will have another family. Elaine and Gordon Connor immediately went to the hospital, and they took the girl's blood to conduct all the necessary tests. The man took her to his daughter's ward. Judith, of course, was no less shocked than her father. However, she reacted very positively to Elaine's appearance. She greeted the girl warmly and then said to her, "There's no such coincidence in nature. You see how we look like two peas in a pod? You are definitely my lost sister." Elaine felt like she had entered a fantastical movie. Although she knew she and Judith were similar, she never felt like she had a sister, let alone a twin. Although twins are supposed to feel these things even at a distance. "Congratulations, your test confirmed your relationship," the doctor announced happily to Gordon and the girls. "If Elaine is ready, we can start the preparation process." All of this was so unexpected and swift for the young girl. "Of course, let's start," she could only nod in agreement. The preparation went well, and soon Judith received a bone marrow transplant and a blood transfusion from her biological sister. After that, the girl quickly began to recover. Meanwhile, Elaine, who lay in the same ward, still couldn't believe that she had gained both a sister and a father at the same time. In the rush of events, Elaine didn't immediately remember that she wanted to talk to her father, but when she felt better, she warned him about his secretary Linda. "Don't trust her, please," Elaine spoke weakly after the surgery. "She's not as nice and kind as she wants to appear." In general terms, the girl told her newly found father about the story of her apartment and that she now lives with the fortune teller Agnesa. Hearing about Agnesa, Gordon immediately remembered her words, "Find the second one." It hit him at once that she had been talking about Judith's sister. He didn't realize it right away. After learning about his secretary's deception, the businessman was furious with her behavior. The next day, he fired the scoundrel and threatened her with jail if she didn't transfer the apartment back to Elaine. Linda, though she wanted to become rich very much, wanted to stay free more, so she gave the apartment back to her nieces and left the city forever. Fully recovered, Elaine was happy to learn that she could now return home. she planned to apply to college as she wanted, and promised her father to visit them with Judith at the first opportunity. The girls had no doubt that they would become friends, so in this regard, Gordon was calm and pleased. Soon, Gordon invited Agnesa to work for him out of gratitude for helping his lost daughter. He made the woman his personal astrologer, and the young woman was delighted that her words came true and saved the lives of an entire family. Gradually, the first timid feelings arose between her and Gordon. Their relationship smoothly transitioned from work to romance. Talking to Agnesa closer, the man realized that she could become a breath of fresh air for him and create that missing domestic comfort that he so dreamed of. Soon they married. The wedding was gorgeous and left many pleasant memories for the guests. Now they all live together and enjoy every day that gives them the opportunity to once again enjoy life and get to know each other from new angles.